Mike, check 1 2 1 2. It's the Y2K collector. And as many of you know, I'm back to doing my retro collecting here in 2024. But I had a thought. If someone gave me $1,000 to start a brand new retro collection from scratch, how would I spend it? And so I kind of wanted to share what I feel like is the best way to start your retro collection if you had $1,000. Now, I know $1,000 seems like a lot of money, but we're in the third month of the year. And so if you break it up between now, March, all the way through December, that gives us 10 months. And if you break that up, that's about $100. So I guess the better question would be, if you had $100 to spend per month for the rest of the year, how would you build out your retro collection in the first year? And so just to get things kicked off, I think the minis, the classic consoles, are the best way to start off your retro collection. And I'm going to start with the SNES Mini. The reason why these make for a great way to start is because this is the closest thing that you're going to get to licensed original hardware. Now, can you get things like a Retron or like an aftermarket emulator or something that will play Super Nintendo games? Sure. But if you want something that's going to be the closest to the most authentic experience, then the best way to go is going to be to go with the classic consoles. And there's no better classic console, in my opinion, than the SNES Classic. Why? Because one, it comes with two controllers instead of one. So you can definitely get to enjoy it with a friend. And you get a good chunk of some of the best games that are available on the Super Nintendo, including Super Mario RPG, Super Mario World, Contra 3, Zelda, Super Mario Kart. You've got Star Fox, Metroid, F-Zero, Earthbound, Mega Man X, and so much more. So, in my opinion, if you're wanting to get started and you wanted to start with retro, but you didn't necessarily want to pay the full price for Super Nintendo and all of these games, you can spend roughly around $90 and get a what I feel would be a very complete Super Nintendo experience with the SNES Classic. And so I think that's a great place to start in building your retro collection. Now, staying in line with the minis, we can't talk about minis without talking about the Super Nintendo's counterpart, the Sega Genesis. Now, the Sega Genesis was the other half of the console war back in the 90s between Nintendo and Sega. And the original Genesis was just amazing. So again, this is going to be the next best way to play hardware that's pretty much identical to the hardware that we played back in the 90s. Now, of course, the console itself isn't identical because it's a mini console, but when you're using the controllers, and I've compared the controllers to standard Sega Genesis controllers, they're darn near identical. It's really almost impossible to tell the difference. And the hardware is licensed. But the best part about it is you get so much bang for buck when you get into these minis, because you can get all of the staple games that made the Sega Genesis the amazing console it was, including games like Alyssa Dragoon, Altered Beast, Ghouls and Ghosts, Golden Axe, Shinobi, the Sonic games, the Streets of Rage games. I mean, so much more. Contra Hardcore, Comic Zone, which was a personal favorite of mine, and so much more. So you get a lot of bang for your buck when you jump into the minis. And then just staying in line with the minis, I think that you definitely want to take some time and dive into the Sega Genesis Mini 2. Why? Because not only do you get exposure to some more exclusive Sega Genesis games, but you also get some exposure to the Sega CD, which is a retro console that not a lot of people had a chance to take advantage of. And in doing so, you're going to get to take advantage of games like Final Fight CD, Sonic CD, Shining Force. You'll also get to try out games like Streets of Rage 3, Earthworm Jim 2, and so much more, including some of the bangers like Ranger X, Shadow Dancer, Shining Force 2, Splatterhouse 2. I mean, these are games that on their own, if you were to try to buy them by themselves, you'd be paying an incredible amount of money because they're ridiculously expensive. And even when you start to look at some of these Sega CD games like Final Fight CD or the Ninja Warriors, or games like Sylpheed, Robo Alesti, which is a really expensive Sega Saturn game, you get so much bang for your buck when you go with these minis. Now, we already said that the SNES Mini is about $90. You can get a Sega Genesis Mini used for about $60, and you can get a complete in box or even new Sega Genesis Mini 2 for roughly around $100. So where am I at right now? About $250. I think that would be roughly around a $250 well spent, because it's going to give you a very complete experience when it comes to trying out some of the retro games. Now, moving along to something a little bit more modern, if you were to buy a standalone console, my recommendation, and pardon the dust on mine, but my recommendation would be to get a PlayStation 3. Now, my PlayStation 3 isn't backwards compatible, but my recommendation would be to pay the money and invest in a backwards compatible PlayStation 3. I know that that would take a huge chunk out of your $1,000 budget, but here's the benefit. It's going to allow you to play some of the older PlayStation games. You'll be able to play some of the PlayStation 1, PlayStation 2 games, and it's going to give you a really big bang for your buck because it's kind of like buying 3 consoles in one. And if I'm wrong on the PlayStation 2 games, let me know down in the comments. I can't remember whether or not you're able to play PlayStation 2 games on the backwards compatible PlayStation 3, but I know for sure you can play most PlayStation 1 games, and I think you get the best bang for your buck by going with the backwards compatible console. So my recommendation would definitely be to pick that up. And then once you got yourself that backwards compatible PlayStation 3, you want to go ahead and get yourself the backwards compatible Wii. Now, my daughter has tore this Wii up, so I think she even tried to stick a couple crayons in the controller ports, which I got to clean that out. But this is a Nintendo Wii that's actually backwards compatible with GameCube games. So I'm buying a console like this. Again, it's like buying 2 consoles in one, and you get the advantage of being able to play Wii games, and you can play GameCube games and take advantage in that way. So I would definitely look to get these 2 consoles, which allow you to kind of get, it's really like 5 consoles between the two when you think about the games that you'd be able to play. And so when you look at paying $330 for the PS3, and then you look at paying another, let's say you paid another, I don't know, 60 to 70 bucks for the Wii, now you're talking about spending somewhere in the neighborhood of $630 to $640 just in consoles. Now that's a lot of money to spend on hardware, but the good thing is that the bulk of this hardware already has games built into it, and if you really wanted to get creative, you could probably jailbreak these and add more, retro games to them, because I do think there's a way that you can jailbreak these. With these guys, the good thing is that, like I said, you're really getting like 3 consoles in one with the PS3, and you're getting 2 consoles in one with the Nintendo Wii, because both have backwards compatibility to older consoles. The only gap that you're going to have here when it comes to Nintendo is you won't be able to play any N64 games, but remember, this is just our first $1,000, so you definitely have more room to grow in your collection. Now, what would you be spending the rest of your money on? Obviously, you'd be spending it on the games. So what would my recommendation be when it comes to the games? My recommendation, especially when it comes to the PlayStation 3, the beautiful thing about PlayStation is they love re-releasing the same game over and over and over again. And they also like to do compilations. So my recommendation would be to buy as many collection series games as possible. One example would be the Metal Gear Solid collection, a game that allows you to take advantage of almost all the Metal Gear Solid games that were created up until that point, including Metal Gear, Metal Gear Solid 2, Solid Snake, and all the other Metal Gear Solid games that came within the time of the PS3 era. So this is one way you could save some money. You also have games like the Ico and Shadow of Colossus collection, right? 2 amazing games that were released on the PlayStation 2 that you can now play on the PlayStation 3, and you get a really great bang for your buck, 2 games in one. And look at that. I don't even think I paid $9.99 for this, because I think I either got this as a buy 2 get one or like 50% off. So, if you were to try and buy these 2 games on the PlayStation 2, they might run you maybe $15 to $20 a pop, but look at that. You could get both games for roughly around $5, and you'll be able to play them on the PS3. Another example, you've got games like the Castlevania collection, another 2 great games for the PS3, or you can do God of War collection, which is another great collection of games that you have for the PS3, which originally released on the PS2. And there are so many other collection games that you can get, including collection games that you can get on the Wii as well, that will allow you to take advantage of the games that are available for both the systems, as well as the older consoles that you can play, or the older games for older consoles that you can play on these backward compatible consoles. So I think that you could probably spend some more time doing the research on the games that you would pick up, because that's going to take a lot more time in terms of picking up the hardware. But in my opinion, I think this would be a great place to start, because it's pretty much going to take you all the way from Gen 2 or maybe Gen 3 all the way to like the 5th or 6th generation of gaming, and you get a lot of bang for your buck with this setup. Let me know down in the comments if you think this is a great way to spend your first $1,000, or if you think there's a better way that you can maximize your dollar. I'm the Y2K Collector. Let me know what you think in the comments. Take it easy.